Welcome back to Sunday Night in America. U.S. and Israeli officials seemed optimistic an agreement with Iran could be close, but then the Iranian-backed Houthis fired a missile hitting near Israel's Ben Gurion airport. Iran cannot be trusted. Why would you trust a country that wants to wipe Israel from the map, destroy America, and still plots to assassinate U.S. government officials? Some U.S. lawmakers are clueless, but they're loud. They question why the U.S. would help Israel. A good thing those lawmakers weren't around 100 years ago, or most of the world would be speaking German and Japanese. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz is out and will face Senate confirmation for UN ambassador, while Marco Rubio's life just got a whole lot busier. Brian Hook knows Iran well. He was Special Envoy and former Assistant Secretary of State. Welcome, sir. Mike Waltz going from National Security Advisor to UN Ambassador, which requires Senate confirmation, which means hearings, and there are going to be questions about signal and other things. Were you surprised at the move?
Well, I think, Trey, you mentioned the hearing. I think at the hearing, it'll be a good opportunity for Mike to explain how the president has the right strategy with regard to Iran. You talked about the Houthi missile attacks in Israel. I would bet anything those are Iranian missiles. And what we're seeing with President Trump is he is giving diplomacy a chance. And if the Iranians were smart, they would stop playing this double game and start getting sincere about some sort of good negotiated outcome that would be good for the Iranian people, that would also be very good for American interests, and would also very much help Israel.
All right, Brian, few people in the world know as much about Iran as you do. So what do you expect a deal with Iran to look like? And is there any way the U.S. agrees to allow Iran any nuclear weapon capacity at all?
Well, the president has said so many times, first term, second term, that Iran will never get a nuclear weapon. And so that is the right policy. I think there are many ways to go about that. And I think you've got Steve Witkoff, who's leading negotiations along with Michael Anton. The president is setting the general direction. The president obviously would like to avoid any kind of military confrontation with Iran. I think that's very possible. And I think if you set very clear negotiating objectives, which is that, as you said, Trey, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, that would be very bad for the Middle East. It'd be very bad for the world. I mean, when you look at Iran's behavior around the region, imagine how much worse it would be if they had a nuclear weapon. And so they're in a bad place now. They have seen President Trump in his first term, who is very serious on these questions of defending America's interests. And I very much hope that Iran starts to take these talks and they don't play this cat and mouse game where they sit at the negotiating table while simultaneously arming and training and equipping the Houthis to attack American forces.
I don't get that. The last time the Houthis did something, they got a fireworks show. I don't understand sending a missile into Tel Aviv. Do you believe, speaking of Israel, that there are some reports that Israel wanted to be more aggressive? Do you believe there's any daylight between the U.S. and Israel when it comes to their Iranian approach?
I think both the United States and Israel share the same objective of stabilizing the Middle East. And the single biggest driver of instability in today's Middle East is the Iranian regime. And I think they share that common objective. And unfortunately, you have this theocracy in Iran, which has robbed its own people blind and has engaged in this proxy warfare around the region. Their last functioning proxy are the Houthis, and they seem to be doubling down at a time when it's not a very good idea, given that they have President Trump in the Oval Office. And so we've had now a few rounds of talks between Steve Witkoff and Abbas Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister. They were recently canceled because, as I said earlier, Iran just is playing this really idiotic game of saying one thing and doing another. And so if the Iranians can get into a better place, I don't think there's anybody who is more sincere about wanting to get to a deal than the president. And Steve's a deal maker, the president's a deal maker. And so There is a deal to be had here. There's no question in my mind about that. And I think that the president has backed Steve's diplomacy with the credible threat of force to defend our interests. But there's no question that the preferred outcome is to settle these things peacefully.
Brian Hook, there may not be a more knowledgeable expert on Iran, and last time I think I was around you, you had a security detail to prove just how dangerous that country is. Thank you for joining us on the Sunday night and for your service to our country.
Thanks, Trey.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.